Welcome, everybody. Thank you so much for joining us at Space Cowboy Books Online for another evening of Flash science fiction stories. Tonight, we have a group of wonderful readers, Douglas A. Blanc, Ricardo Victoria, and Adele Gardner. We're going to start the evening off with Douglas A. Blanc. Douglas A. Blanc is an Afrofuturist writer and visual artist. He finished his first science fantasy novel, The Downsider, last year and is currently working on getting it published. Douglas lives and works in Joshua Tree as a body worker and massage teacher. I'm going to hand it over to Doug for his story.
Thank you very much, Jean-Paul. And thank you, Space Cowboy Books, for hosting this event and so many other great science fiction events. Tonight's story for you is entitled Come Home, Laika. And thank you all so much for joining us. The inner hull vibrates as the dropship enters the upper strata of the atmosphere. The pull of Earth's gravity grabs our space armor and presses us into our seats. Me and a dozen of my fellow Marines are strapped into 2 rows of benches as the landing craft begins to buck. Sergeant Lassie walks up and down the aisle between the benches. She has her helmet off and approaches each one of us one by one. She leans in close and rubs her muzzle against each of the Marines, growling words of encouragement. When it's my turn, she flashes her teeth and says, "Corporal Tracker." She strokes her muzzle against mine, and her smell reminds me of my own mom and my littermates far away on Canis Major. I sigh and my neck and shoulders relax. Sarge whispers in my ear, "Who's a good boy?" Unconsciously, my back leg bangs rhythmically against the metal deck. As Sergeant Lassie moves on to the others, I notice a persistent squeaking noise across from me. Scout, a nervous husky from Cerebus Prime, is chewing compulsively on a star-shaped squeaky toy strapped to the front of his armor. "Scout," I hiss across the aisle. "Get it together." "I can't, dog," Scout whispers through clenched teeth. "I hate these drops. The loud noises, the flashing lights. I can't take it, dog." The toy in his mouth is squeaking madly now, louder and faster. I pull my glove off and loosen my chest harness. I reach across with my bare paw and gently scratch Scout under his chin. The squeaking slows and then stops as he drops the toy. He opens his mouth and begins panting. "Thanks, dog. I needed that." Someone down the row calls out, "Hey, Renton, why are you drinking so much?" A German Shepherd with a bad scar over her eye lifts her head from a bowl of water and barks, her muzzle dripping. "I'm gonna piss on every human bunker we clear. I need to load up the old bladder." The dogs around her bark with laughter. "All right, listen up, pups," Sergeant Lassie yells. She has finished her rounds and is standing in the middle of the aisle. "We are about to make our final descent to the surface. We expect heavy resistance on the ground from the humans. Don't be afraid. You are not alone. We are one of thousands of dropships, carrying tens of thousands of Marines. And when we land, we will form one of the biggest packs these human scum have ever seen." The cabin erupts with barks and yowls. "Earth," Sarge continues solemnly, "is the key to our struggle for liberation. We have fought the hairless apes for thousands of years on hundreds of outer planets. Today, we bring the fight to them. No canine has ever set paw on Earth as a free dog. Today, we come with no collars," barking and howling again. "Today, we come with no leashes and no microchips. We do not come spayed or neutered. We do not come naked. We come armed to the teeth." My fellow Marines bang the metal deck and bark. We do not return to Earth with our tails between our legs, but held high. At the far end of the cabin, a retriever jumps out of his seat and turns around to display his fluffy blonde tail, wagging madly. "All right, Private Goldie," Sergeant Lassie bellows, "sit down and put your damn tail back in your armor, unless you want to lose it." At this, everyone turns and looks at Stumpy, a gray schnauzer seated at the end of the bench with her head down. She lost her tail 2 years ago in the Battle of Io and gained a new nickname. They all laugh at her. Without looking up, she raises her paw and lifts the middle digit. This elicits even louder barks. Still, she doesn't look up from her lap. "Aw, come on, Stumpy," says Goldie. "What are you looking at that's so interesting?" Stumpy pushes her glasses up on her nose. "I'm reading this holodisc about Laika." Scout wrinkles up his nose. "Laika? What's a Laika?" "This disc says it's the name of a dog, the first dog in space," Stumpy says, reading from a small holo display in her paws. 4,000 years ago, on Earth, a group of human scientists kidnapped Laika off the streets of a city called Moscow. It was believed she had pups, but they were left behind. These scientists perform experiments on her for a year. An old grizzled beagle next to me growls at the back of his throat. They strapped her into a tiny capsule with a feeding tube and a diaper, and wired her with electrodes to monitor her heart rate and body temperature. The capsule was placed on top of an oxygen kerosene rocket, and Stumpy looks up at her fellow Marines in the cabin. She was launched into orbit. "She was alone?" Goldie gasps. "Yeah, she was alone." The only sound is the groaning of the hull and the rumble of the heat shields under our paws. After a moment, Stumpy continues. "During launch, Laika's heart rate reached 300 beats per minute. She reached orbit successfully, and the capsule was equipped with air recyclers and thermal regulators, enough for 10 days. But there was a malfunction. And within a few hours, the temperature inside the capsule rose. Her heart stopped after 3.5 revolutions around Earth. Her dead body continued to orbit for 6 months. And then they just let her burn up when the capsule re-entered the atmosphere." Stumpy shuts down the disc and looks at her fellow Marines. A huge Great Dane growls, "Human scum." "Barbarians," someone mutters. Outside the tiny portholes, the hull is glowing orange as the dropship hits thicker layers of atmosphere. Sergeant Lassie stands and sighs. "All right, pups, load your gear and stow your fear." She slaps her rifle. "Laika is not alone today, pups. We are here. And we are going to bring Laika home." We bang our boots on the deck and raise our heads to howl together as one pack as we hurtle towards Earth. The end. Thank you all. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much. That was Douglas A. Blanc with Come Home Laika. Next up, we are going to have Ricardo Victoria. Ricardo Victoria is a Mexican design lecturer, as well as a writer of science fiction, fantasy, and horror. He is the author of the Tempest Blade saga science fantasy novels and at least 12 short stories published in different outlets. He's also a brand new member of the SFWA. I'm going to hand it over to Ricardo to share his story, First Flight.
Thank you, John Paul. First Flight. If she finds out you have that track, you are dead, Sid, Alex said to the Samuro, who looked like a cross between a turtle and an iguana, wearing human clothes and tennis shoes. Sid was sitting to his left, in the Figaro's cockpit. The ship had been their project for years, built in secret with the scraps inside a barn, with one aim, a fully functional airship that could navigate the treacherous skies of Theia. "No, if you don't say anything," Sid replied, as he adjusted the volume of the music. "Besides, I don't know why she doesn't like it. It's her best so far, befitting of a first flight, which will start in T-10. "Because Gabby thinks it's not finished," Alex replied, "and she won't share it till it is. Something you might consider emulating, given that the Figaro is not ready for this test. This is our last chance for it before you go back to school and I have to work on this ship alone again. T-5, the energy core output looks stable." "Guilt tripping is cheating," Alex sighed. "Relies our fast controls on circuits online. But it works. You are here, And here we go! Oh crap! The figure accelerated across the ramp, which led its trajectory towards the sky. The goal was to break the upper ceiling that only the Great War dreadnoughts had reached a century ago, thanks to the heavily electrically charged upper atmosphere of Theia, which stopped any human or samurai ship from flying above that due to the risk of being fried and sent back crashing into the ground. But legend said that once upon a time, but humans and samurais has reached Theia using space arcs. Free folks, on the other hand, use portals. And to avoid detection from the ancient enemy that had destroyed their original worlds, both species had forsaken any technology that allowed them to reach the stars again. Sid, being a firm believer of those legends, and having found the remains of an ancient Samurai asteroid mining ship, wanted to change that. 6,000 meters, 7,000 meters, Alex yelled as he reached the altimeter. Sid smiled. I know that smile, Alex said worried. Alex, sometimes you need to run before you can walk, and records are meant to be broken. Sid replied as he pushed the figure further. Alex had a knot in the bottom of his stomach. It was like riding a roller coaster, multiplied tenfold. The joy of reaching the sky was so exhilarating that his adrenaline levels rose high, enough that small sparks of energy came involuntarily from his fingers. The Figaro pierced a thick dark cloud and reached the stratosphere before a random energy discharge coming down from Theia's weird ionosphere hit the Figaro, damaging some controls, sending it rocketing towards the exosphere and space. What happened? Alex asked through gritted teeth as the speed pushed him against the seat. That discharge must have damaged something, Sid replied, trying to regain control of the Figaro before they reach escape velocity. Hold tight or microgravity will disorient you. For a brief moment, Alex floated, held to the seat only by the harness, and witnessed what few had. The upper atmosphere of Theia, the rings orbiting the blue and green planet, the round moon, and the distant long moon. The overview effect took over them, leaving both silent, admiring the fragile home. The reverie lasted until the onboard alarms blasted and the ship began its descent into the ionosphere, gravity pulling them down. Sid reacted fast, grabbing the controls, steadying the ship long enough to correct the re-entry angle, enough to avoid being burned to a crisp. The ship rocked as one of the back spoilers was ripped away by the forced re-entry. Sid was sweating profusely, the Figaro carrying down as soon as it passed the ionosphere. I think I'm gonna puke, Alex muttered. Well, do it quickly because I need your help with the surface controls. Alex pushed through the dizziness as his irises glowed gold. Good, Sid replied, as his co-pilot activated his special powers. Extend all flaps and drive fins. I will reduce the main thrusters output, redirecting to control drivers. We're still missing one spoiler, Alex replied. Don't worry, we still have most of the ship, Sid offered with a tight smile. The Figaro trembled as the flight path stabilized. Steady, steady, Sid yelled as he gained the full control of the ship, long enough to land near the barn. Alex had to give it to Sid. The Samurai never batted an eyelid at the ordeal. It was true that their biology had evolved to endure the rigors of space travel, which lent credence to the legends. Restarting main thrusters at 20%. Brace yourself, because it will be a rough landing, Sid said as he pressed the ignition button and the Figaro's engines roared once more. The Figaro descended slow enough to pull a rough landing that left a groove in the grass-covered ground and took down the old windmill next to the barn. With half-closed eyes, Alex saw the Figaro stopping just outside the barn entrance, next to the ramp. Phew, that was close, Sid said as he turned off the figure's engines and the ship stopped to tremble. I need to make a note of reinforcing the hull to better handle electromagnetic discharge from the upper atmosphere. That would be good. I mean, an emergency landing where you come out alive is not a mistake, but a lesson. Alex replied with a half smile as he released the reed he didn't know he was holding till now. Where did you hear that? Sid turned at Alex, raising an eyebrow. My driving lessons? Alex shrugged. You can argue it's a good advice. As long as it doesn't become a running gag, Sid replied as he unfastened his harness and stood up to exit the figure. Alex followed him with shaky legs. Second note, we really need that artificial intelligence finished for flight assistance, orbital especially. Easy. It's not like you're planning to take the figure to the moons anytime soon, Alex said as Bud exited the figure through the cargo bay. You never know. Walk inside the barn. Alex stood there as realization hit him like a ton of bricks, kickstarting an ancient attack. Sid was hell-bent in making it to the stars. Hopefully, the figure's next flight will be less eventful. The end.
Thank you so much. That was Ricardo Victoria with First Flight. Next up, we're going to have Adele Gardner. Adele Gardner is a fiction writer and award-winning poet with a poetry collection, Halloween Hearts, forthcoming from Jack and Apes Press, and work in analog science fiction. In fact, Clark's World, Strange Horizons, Podcastle, and daily science fiction. This gender-fluid night owl loves libraries, samurai films, and reading comics with cats. Adele serves as literary executor for father, mentor, and namesake Delbert R. Gardner. Their work can be found at gardnercastle.com. They're going to be sharing their story with us this evening, Bird Brains. I'll hand it over to Adele.
Thank you so much. These are the best birds I have, I lied. That's why I'm asking. We don't want any of those inferior birds. The man waved a peach hand at the rows of rubber ducks and the fake tree with pouches that held singing toy birds covered with incongruous plush fur. He put an arm around the shoulders of his tiny bird-like wife. Her blue eyes, caged by pale coral wrinkles and gold-rimmed spectacles, held a peculiar lost look I recognized. I didn't want to tell them that I had my own live bird back behind the storeroom, Finnivar Whitewing, who'd lived with me now for 28 years, my friend and companion who'd sat on Dad's mahogany finger and traded singing lessons. Dad had flown off into the great beyond, but my dove still spoke to me in my father's voice. My human interlocutor looked almost as round as Dad. The buttons on his faded blue striped shirt puckered over a waist marked by worn brown trousers held high with suspenders. He planted a peck in the nest of his wife's blue hair. She's my best girl, he confided. That's why only your best bird will do. I hoped he didn't read any meaning in the sweat molding my flowered dress to what doctors like to call my well-nourished form. I understand. Have you tried a pet shop? The real thing is always best. His wife looked up at him with hopeful, inquisitive eyes. He scowled. Out of stock. Every store in a 500-mile radius. A lot have closed their doors. Avian flu. And, he leaned forward to whisper, the fever. The demand, you know. He pulled a plain white handkerchief from his breast pocket and mopped his brow. Bird brain fever. What pundit had called it that? They were entirely wrong. This virus befuddled the human brain in its maze of memory, as if the brain's internal poles had shifted slightly, like the planet on its axis, confusing us as much as some migrating birds. Only one thing helped, retraining the neural pathways along a more ancient pattern, that of the sophisticated avian brain, last survivor of the dinosaur age. It turned out many birds still considered us friends, though God knows we didn't deserve it after all we'd done to them. Even Virginia Belmont's dearest companions, who'd spontaneously spoken their love, still spent their nights in a gilded cage. Too many sufferers, not enough tame birds. The lucky humans formed a symbiosis with their new friends, living highly creative lives with their sky-minded perspectives, flights of fancy, and airborne intuitive leaps. We loved both our family members and their birds, who located our dear ones in the wilderness of their minds and led them out again. Lacking enough live birds, some had suggested that the very idea of a bird would do. Andersen's emperor had, after all, loved his mechanical nightingale, which seemed rather to miss the point of that particular story. And yet it worked for some. Maybe the act of focusing intensely on one object helped forge a pathway for the will. But I would never forget how Finnevar had brought my father to life again, how Daddy had looked before learning the dove's song, his kind brown eyes bewildered behind their fishbowl lenses, his great intelligence and loving spirit trapped within the very intricacies of his own mind. I could guess by the patched knees of the man's trousers and the woman's threadbare dress that they probably couldn't afford a bird even if they found one. Maybe they had a retirement account somewhere. With so few gray strands smoothed over his scalp, the man looked old enough to have started working back when they still had those. Maybe he'd be willing to throw it all away for the chance to help his wife reclaim the sweet bird of youth. But these miracle cures only lasted for so long, another 9 years at most, a lifetime. I led them up and down our picked over shelves. Every time we neared the stockroom, I sent up a silent prayer that Finnevar wouldn't choose this moment for a ringneck dove's deep, soulful call. Unless, of course, he warbled out Dad's rendition of I Believe in Miracles or Straighten Up and Fly Right. The man spoke to his mate quietly, guiding her by the elbow as they bent over glass birds and set off cuckoo clocks. He whistled to attract her attention to wind-up birds and portraits of owls, communicating partly by his choice of song. Like Dad, he had a pretty good whistle too. I caught myself wondering what would happen if they blew their life savings on a bird for her and she successfully winged her way back to him, only to find him afflicted by the same disease. It had happened with my mother. Finnevar was a brave bird, but his wings did not have strength enough to carry two at once, and he'd already bonded with my father by then. We reached the end of the store. She still clung to his arm as if to a perch, her eyes hopeful as they fastened on his. My heart cracked like an egg. I put a finger to my lips for silence as I led them into the back room where Finnevar flew, the soft white undersides of his wings flashing as he danced above my head. He landed there, preening the hair I keep short for him, as he cooed to me in Daddy's voice, "There ain't nobody here but us chickens." I pantomimed. With a little help from her husband, the woman copied me faithfully, holding out her skinny arm. Finnevar hopped on her finger and nuzzled her cheek. At the joy in their eyes, my heart soared. That is the end, but I'm going to show you Finnevar if I may. This is my actual dove, Finnevar. He's actually 28, which is really amazing for a dove. And I'll sing you. This is it. He's not going to sing to you. Ooh, 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 ooh. Sorry, just had to show.
Thank you, Adele. That was a treat. That was Adele Gardner with Bird Brains. Before that, you heard Ricardo Victoria with First Flight, and opening up the show was Douglas A. Blanc with Come Home Laika. Thank you so much to our readers this evening for such wonderful stories. Thank you to our audience for joining us, and we hope that you will join us at our next Flash Science Fiction Night, which is coming up on August 23rd. We're going to have Avra Margariti from Greece, Mary Soon Lee, and Charlie Jane Anders. So it's bound to be another evening of wonderful stories. Thank you so much, everybody. Have a great night.